Welcome to How to Homeschool Radio, the show where we help new and veteran homeschoolers create a successful homeschool that works for their families. Whether you're thinking about homeschooling, just started homeschooling, or have been homeschooling for years, you've come to the right place. I'm your host, Judy Sardin, homeschooling coach, homeschooling mom of two, and author of Sardin's Practical Guide, How to Start Homeschooling. Are you ready? Let's get to it. Welcome to the Spanish education episode of the How to Homeschool podcast. So here we are with Ron Fortin. He is the CEO of the Homeschool Spanish Academy, which I personally use. I'm in my second year using it, and I absolutely love it. So I've already given you kind of an introduction to Ron, so I'm going to pass it over to him. Ron, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
My name is Ron, and it's kind of confusing on how to start this narrative. So I guess, with the obvious, I do not look Guatemalan. I am actually currently in Guatemala, in Antigua, where our operational base is located in our offices here. But I was actually born and raised in Texas, and my parents are of Filipino descent. And so I guess I'm first generation born American. And so my story is very all over the place. And so if you will do me the honor, I'll try to give you a shortened version of what happened. Graduating after high school, ended up going into the military 2 weeks after 9/11 into the Marine Corps. It was a very interesting time. And I ended up serving for 4 years, and my job was a military musician. So I had a really, really interesting career as a saxophonist, clarinetist in the Marine Corps band. And so I ended up doing that, using the GI Bill to go to college in San Antonio at Trinity University. After that, ended up going into consulting in the communication space. And so it was there that I kind of learned about technology, learned a lot about the internet, how it functioned, and that becomes more relevant later in the story. And so while I was there, I kind of understood that that's not where I wanted to be long-term, learned a lot of really cool things, but really just kind of understood that I really want to impact lives and want to be within 2 to 3 degrees of separation between me and the end user. In the corporate world, I was like 15 degrees of separation away, and I just didn't really feel the impact, and it didn't really feel like I had a sense and purpose of what I was doing. So an opportunity came along where a friend of mine was already here in Guatemala at the time, and he was working with an NGO, non-governmental organization, and he was the director of a school for impoverished kids doing missionary work and whatnot. And I came down to visit one weekend, really. It basically turns and says to me, Ron, I feel like you should quit your job and move down here to be the director of this school. I was like, thank you, but let me think about it. Didn't say no, didn't say yes, went back to the US. A bunch of things was just kind of happened in my personal life to where that opportunity became something like, when else am I going to have an opportunity to do something like this? And so I grabbed it. I ended up, taking the missionary position and the job as a director for impoverished kids here in Guatemala. Didn't know any Spanish whatsoever, except, everybody has high school Spanish growing up, and you have to learn that. And so, he tells me, hey, Ron, you should probably learn some Spanish before you come down. And so what ends up happening is he says, I know a teacher here who has an internet connection at our house. Have you ever heard of this program called Skype? And, this was back in 2008, 2009. This whole idea of online video conferencing was brand new at the time. Nobody was really doing it. And so he put me in contact with her. I started communicating with her, in between, after hours, after work, online. And within 5 weeks, I really got a pretty decent command of the Spanish language. And by the time I came down, I could form, basic sentences. I had to communicate with my with my staff. I had a staff of 13 that I had to communicate with in Spanish. And, I could understand about 50 or 60% of what was coming at me. And I tell you what, that learning curve was really steep. And,
I bet.
Within about 3 months, I had a much better command, felt a lot more comfortable. By 6 months time frame, I was doing a lot better. By a year time frame, I was fairly fluent and very confident in the language.
Wow.
And then just after that, it just kind of kept, getting better and better.
Yeah.
Now I'm about 10 years in. That was, 2009. And so anyway, I had to learn the language through pure immersion, and I was in it for 16 hours a day. But that initial 5 weeks, I was so blown away by how impressive and how effective that methodology was. And, there were no real materials. You can imagine at that time, and even today, the internet infrastructure was very unreliable. It was dropping like every 5 minutes. But it was still so effective. And I just thought to myself, like, I can really improve this, and nobody else was really doing it. And so I, after my 2-year obligation, I pulled the trigger on starting a business. And at first I was kind of like all over the place. Like I was kind of catering to tourists and, just like anybody who wanted to learn Spanish. And then I had a neighbor across the street who they were expats, meaning they were living here, and they were former homeschoolers. They grew up in the 80s, homeschooling in Texas, which is kind of like a huge community.
Yes.
And they basically told me, like, man, if we had this when we were homeschooling, like, we would have signed up in a heartbeat.
Yes.
And so they were the ones actually who made the initial communication and calls for me to get in contact with some of the early adopters of homeschooling. And we're like, here's a service, get in contact with them. We ended up going to a couple of homeschool conventions just to go check it out. And it was very well received. And so we were like, hey, let's go with homeschoolers and see how we can best serve them. Yeah. And to date, they've been such a wonderful community to serve, and a community to really see the fruit of what this program can offer. A lot of our students need the high school credit, and they're able to end that 2-year journey, not only learning and getting credit, but then also being able to apply the Spanish language to a level of fluency that they didn't think was possible. And so, to that result, we've continued to grow and continue to improve and help. And so, it's kind of like the basic outline. And I hope that answers most of the question of who I am, how we got started, and more than happy to answer any other questions you may have.
That's awesome. So why don't you tell me, because like I said, we take it, and I have a middle schooler.
Yep.
And I have a child who's in late elementary. And so you said that when you first started, there were no materials. So tell me about, there are materials now, and I'm grateful for them because we need them. Absolutely. So tell me about how you develop the materials and just how those materials do help with that language acquisition.
Absolutely. And so the materials were all developed in-house. So we have a staff of about 70 teachers at this point. And just over the past decade, we have developed our system of documents and materials and exercises as a collaborative effort. And we do our best to align to the ACTFL standards in the United States so that everything kind of, goes in conjunction with what they need to be learning, if they're college bound or if they're trying to get credit, things of that nature. And so the way that the materials work is at the moment, they're currently all PDF. We are moving to a more electronic version, but they basically present the lesson, and then they allow the students to take that work outside of the classroom to do the exercises on their own, and then apply the lessons. And the teachers do use those documents also within the class. But then they also have other activities and games and other things that they use and utilize depending on, the student's best methodology of learning in order to really connect the material to how they learn best.
So what I really like about the materials is that, say this is a 14, we are doing the year round. So we've got 14 lessons, and I typically have the children do the lesson before the class.
Right.
And it seems like, the teachers have had me come on so they could talk to me at the beginning of the semester and see what my goal was.
Right.
For the kids. And so they are catering to that. And
Exactly.
so I find that it's a very, while you do have the materials, the set materials, it's a very customized.
Mm-hmm.
So can tell us how you came about that, because a lot of places are, they're very rigid, especially here in the United States. Everybody has to do it the same way.
Yeah. And so, one of the things that makes us very special and unique is that we do try to tailor it exactly to how the learner learns best, right? Like you can go at your own pace. You can pace it how you need it to be, right? If you just want a little bit of extra practice, you can do it 30 minutes a week. If you want a high school credit, we suggest, 2 hours a week plus homework outside of class. And then we also know that certain students have different nuances. So some parents want more English used in class. Other parents want absolutely no English used in class. And so it was like virtually impossible to have a specific one size fits all. And that we really did need this model and training and create systems around what the parent, but also what the student needs more importantly. Because what we find is just, in order to connect the language and make it really come alive, you really have to understand what makes that individual tick. So, I've heard stories of teachers saying like, oh yeah, this particular student was telling me about their pet, or, oh, this student was really into music and they had a piano recital and they played, this song for me and it was really awesome. Or even like the parent-teacher conference that you talked about, that's standard built-in protocol to where like every fifth class, the teacher gets on, has a few minutes with the parent to kind of say, hey, how are we doing? This is what your student has gone through. This is what they have accomplished. This is what they should be able to do. And so I think that's just super unique in that we really just want to really partner with the homeschooling parent and with the student's education to really offer them the best experience possible. Because at the end of the day, that's what we're about. We're about the experience. We're not a computer program per se. We're not software that's impersonal. Yes. We're real live human beings with real live stories and real life personalities and characteristics. And that's just something that a computer program just can't replicate.
And another thing that I like about your materials is my children have taken numerous Spanish classes over the years, and every single one starts with the same thing. We're going to count to 10. We're going to count to 100. We're going to do colors. Like every single one starts the same way. Yeah. And what I like about you guys is that you guys really jump into real vocabulary, conjugations pretty quickly. And
pretty quick.
The children have taken a full year Spanish class and never really gotten into conjugations and into actually putting sentences together.
Yeah.
And so that's even the elementary, even when my daughter took it last year in 4th grade, they were doing conjugations by second semester where they were having to change the verb and having to change the subject verb agreement, just like she does in English. And so that's the one thing that has really been different, because I've taken some in-person classes before.
Yeah. And, it's the phenomena really is this personal connection and this need to be able to communicate with people. And as human beings, like your desire to be understood and to understand just like makes you forces you to get through that barrier that you don't necessarily have when you have a completely bilingual individual. So when you have a completely bilingual individual, you kind of have that crutch, and you have that crutch in that back of your mind. You're like, I'm just going to communicate this person in English because it's easier, right? And so, I find myself doing that even in meetings. It's like, if I know that the majority of the room, because all of the teachers are bilingual, let me just put that out there, and they understand English, but it's almost like, how am I best going to express this thought and idea to where the majority of the room is going to understand and get the sentiment and the intention of what I'm trying to say? And so you have that basic need as a human to communicate, even at the most basic of levels, and no matter where you are in your ability to communicate. So whether it's hand gestures or like full on language and speech, you're going to want to communicate. And so I think that's what makes us like really unique, and that's what makes our program unique is we kind of remove that crutch. And we say, no, you need to do it the real way. And and just try to make it personable and make that connection right off the bat.
It's been great because I'm one of those parents who ask, especially for my older child, use like as little English as possible. So his teacher, because he catches on faster. And and I know where he was at the end of last year. So I asked her at the beginning of this year to use all Spanish. And so she communicates with him in all Spanish. Except for when he clearly needs an English explanation, or unless he says, como se dice, whatever. So, but I love that. And so with my daughter, she's younger and she doesn't memorize as well. And so the teacher uses as much Spanish as possible, but she does have to use a little bit more English with her. But we're trying to move and get her to reply back in Spanish. Different kids are different. And that's the beauty of it, right? Like one child learns at a much faster rate, and then another child learns at a different pace, but that's okay because that's the way that they learn, and there's nothing wrong with that. And so we move accordingly. So that's what I love. So tell me about your teachers and how they help, especially the kids who need college credit or high school credit.
So those are two separate topics. So let me start with the teachers and kind of, get the full backdrop here. The opportunity really in Guatemala was that Antigua is kind of known as an immersion hub. Like people have been coming here for decades to learn how to speak Spanish for through full immersion Spanish, but through the lens and through the idea of being tourists only. So what ended up happening is this became like this huge hub of Spanish talent and Spanish teaching talent, but their job security was very up and down, spiky, and there was no consistency. And so what we're able to do as HSA is say, hey, you're a really talented individual, and we know that there are people in the world who would like to utilize your talent all year round. Let's offer you the stability of a 12-month job. And then, oh, by the way, just my mentality and, the world that I come from is we're going to treat you like a human being. We're going to give you healthcare, healthcare benefits, paid vacation, bonuses throughout the year, career advancement, career training, technological access. We have a lot of benefits that we can offer you. How does that sound to you, right? And so the overwhelming response is Guatemala being a third world country. These norms are normal in the United States, but they're very rare here in Guatemala. And so what you have is kind of this unique opportunity to capture some of the best talent in the area. And so what I mean by that is we have folks who actually have like law degrees, accounting degrees, psychology degrees, and have gone engineers, but there isn't like an economy or a job opportunity to match that demand. And so what you have is some of the best teachers in the area, the most highly intelligent, capable individuals who can teach Spanish at a very high level. And they go through our program of becoming certified to teach Spanish as a second language. That's recognized by the Educational Board of Guatemala, Ministry of Education. And so that certification allows them to legally teach. And so where that comes into play with the high school student in the United States is we actually partner with a regional high school. It's called North Atlantic Regional High School, NARS. And basically they have the overall accreditation from the it's the Middle States Association of Colleges and Schools. And so if somebody wants official credit stamp, with that accreditation, which is the highest accreditation you can get in the United States, they have audited our program. They have certified our program to say, yes, this is something that we accept. And we feel comfortable putting our name behind it, and that credit is valid. And so in the future, we hope to, achieve other accreditations, because there's a million different accreditations that you can get out there. But that's the one that most of our clients go with. But we think that it's important to be able to say that, yes, we meet this particular standard. But as a service and a business, there aren't a whole lot of examples out there. That accreditation comes, the Middle States Association of Colleges and Schools, and depending on where you are in the United States, they all have their own, specific body, but they're all accepted like throughout the United States. So that part's a little bit complicated, but in general, what we're trying to say is that our students can receive high school credit, and our program is legit, and it not only gets you through all of the basics and all of the material that you need, but again, it goes one step further in getting you to fluency. And the way we kind of describe that is being able to hold a conversation without any aids for 5 or 10 minutes with a native Spanish speaker. And again, that's one step beyond the high school credit, but that's kind of how we kind of gauge our program. So I hope that was helpful. And I know that's a lot of information, a lot of acronyms kind of floating around, but yes, we want our students to be able to get that high school credit so that they can move on. We've had a lot of customers come back to us and said, yeah, our son or daughter, after taking 2 years of your program, they were able to place out of, college, Spanish. And so thank you. That saved us thousands of dollars. And so
that's what I'm banking on. I am banking on exactly that.
Yeah. So the program ends up becoming worth it even more so, right? Like there's even additional value. And so in the future, we want to be able to provide those services to where, obviously there's the CLEP, the AP, SAT2s and the GRE and a whole host of tests that we want to be able to help our students prepare for. So it's definitely a journey, and we're just taking it one step at a time at this point.
Mm-hmm. So even though you're called Homeschool Spanish Academy, obviously you take kids who are not homeschooled, and I'm assuming you take adults too. So
correct.
Why don't you tell us about those other markets that you serve?
Yes. So we have programs starting as young as 5. So we've taken students as young as 3.5, and both homeschooled and non-homeschooled. And basically we go preschool, elementary, middle school, high school, and then we have adult programs as well, like you mentioned. And we also know that adults have varying needs in addition to just one generic adult program. So we also have sub-programs within the adult program that cover law enforcement, medicine, law, missionary work, construction. And basically, if there's a need for a program, we already have the material to just craft a curriculum so that we can make you successful. And so we've had all the ones that I've mentioned, we've had customers who have gone through that program, and we created that specific program because there was a need for it. And so adults, just because of our name, mainly happen to be a smaller portion of our customer base. The majority of our customer base happen to be homeschoolers. I also forgot to mention businesses. We have worked and partnered with businesses to create programs that have catered to their business needs, whether, again, that be legal, just business jargon, and other needs of that nature. We have other programs. We work with small organizations, be it co-ops, be it small private schools, university model schools, and charter schools, and even public charter schools as well. If they have a need for Spanish and they see that our program can be a good fit, and this is where I go back to the military aspect of things. As a Marine, I kind of imprinted the Marine structure and capabilities onto kind of how our organizational structure is. And the way that the military operates in the Marine Corps specifically is you can take a small unit and apply them to varying different applications and situations depending on what the need is. And so with our teams can restructure and destructure and restructure according to what the need is of the organization, the individual, and the learner. And so all the way down to the basic unit, all the way up to, an entire department. So we can build a department if it's needed for, let's say, a Fortune 500 company, if that's needed, or if we need like a co-op that just needs a couple of classes for a group of 10 students, we can do that as well. In terms of offerings, we've recently, within the last couple of years, have also started offering small group classes for, those larger organizations such as university model schools, private schools, and businesses.
Okay, so that's actually how I met you guys, because I was with a homeschool group, and we started with the classes. And so, because I know there are a lot of co-ops out there, tons of co-ops, and a lot of people who say might not be able to afford the private ones might be able to get a co-op to put together a class, like you said, for 5 to 10 kids or whatever.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit more about that model just for homeschool co-op folks out there?
Absolutely. But one quick anecdote of how I came to know and understand and know of your co-op group. I actually saw an interview on PBS NewsHour.
Oh, I was on that.
Yeah. And so I actually saw you and Amber Johnson.
Yes.
The name of the group came up, and I was like, let me just shoot them an email. And you guys were easy enough to find online. And that's the world we live in. Like, it's such a small world.
Yes.
I basically shot an email to Amber Johnson, who was like the head of the group at the time.
Yes, still is.
Still is. And she put us in contact. And so 2 years later, and that was 2 years ago. And so 2 years later, here we are. Here we are, and having this conversation. So about co-ops, and what co-ops can do is if they are able to contact us and they're interested in putting a group together, we will go out of our way to work with you as we call them our group classes, and we can specialize in crafting those group classes specifically for your co-op. And those classes can range anywhere from 3 students up to 10 students. The reason why we're going through the co-op is because we do need a couple of things, and we do need some help from a point person, in that we need to understand, like, all right, who's had Spanish before? What is their level? What are their time and preferences? What days can they have classes? And that takes some coordinating and some logistical back and forth. But the byproduct is that we can get high quality Spanish education for a large amount of people relatively fast. And obviously, if you want to achieve fluency the fastest, and if you want one-on-one experience, we highly recommend the one-on-one, two-on-one experience. We offer paired classes for families, and basically what that is 2 students meet at the same time with one instructor. They either share computers, or they can work off their own individual devices, whether that be mobile phone or iPad or laptop. And basically the requirements there is that we require them to be within 3 grade levels of each other.
Okay.
And so, so that we're not moving too fast or too slow.
Yes.
And they have to be able to work well together. Yeah. So, and on the same level in terms of Spanish. So ideally, they all have the same Spanish experience to draw from, so they can learn at the same time.
I understand, because my 2 children, even though they're only 17 months apart, they could not take a class together just because of their learning styles and speed.
Yeah. But that's what we find often is, we'll have students who will start off in a group class or a paired class, and then they make the decision, and the conscious, decision and observation really, that, hey, maybe this would be more effective if my students were to do this independently. And we go both ways. We say, hey, these 2 students that we have, I think I want to pair them together. And so they'll go that route as well. So it just, again, it depends on the need, depends on the learner, and there's so many different variables, but we're flexible enough to make all those situations happen successfully.
That's great. And I have to say, I love that you're in the Marines. My dad was a Marine. And my brother's in the Army, but you're so military, and it's so familiar, but it's kind of funny too. So just a lot of people, I'm just going to express my own bias here.
Sure.
A lot of homeschoolers take Latin. And Latin is the big thing, is classical education. And I was doing classical, and you know what? My mom made me take Latin in high school because she was determined that I was going to be a doctor. Well, I never went to medical school. I actually ended up being a lawyer for 20 years.
Oh,
but
wow.
that Latin didn't help me one jot. But what would have helped me was if I had learned Spanish.
Yeah.
And so I wish I would have learned Spanish. And so I'd like you to just kind of, and we're almost done. I'd like you to kind of talk about what you see as, Spanish being so much more useful. If you've got to choose a language, and you've got to pay a tutor for Latin, or you have to pay a tutor for Spanish.
Yeah.
Can you just talk about how much more useful, or how useful, you don't have to bash Spanish, but how useful Spanish is just living in the world and business and things like that?
It's funny you say that, because we actually have a group class, classical conversations. They're based in Latin, out of North Carolina.
Yes.
And they're taking Spanish classes with us. And so Latin has a ton of applications. There's a lot of foundational education that happens with Latin. So like you said, I want to give it its credit where credit's due. The advantage of taking Spanish is, simply put, you kind of get, you get those, undoubtedly you get those Latin roots.
Yes.
But you get the use of a living language in that, man, Spanish and Latin are two peas in a pod. They're super related, more so than English.
Yes.
And the conjugations, the roots, and all of those laws and rules, subject, verb, agreement, and all that stuff, all that is in the Spanish formula, if you will.
Yes.
Except that it becomes more alive because you can apply it. Mm-hmm. And because of that, I think it adds tremendous value to anybody who wants to learn that, both in the corporate world, but also in your personal life. I can't tell you how many times on a personal level, I've taken buses across Texas, and I just happened to be sitting next to a Spanish speaker, or, and within 15 minutes, she's pulling out her pictures of her grandkids. Yeah. We're going through that. And that personal connection, or being able to help somebody in the airport, and the satisfaction that you get, to be able to just help somebody out who needs it. And I went to Washington, D.C., and I went to the Holocaust Museum, and there was a Spanish-speaking couple that didn't know English. The tour guide didn't know English. And so I was their translator. Yeah. And I wouldn't call myself a translator, but I was their translator for that tour.
Yeah.
And so how cool was that, to be able to give them that experience, and to be able to communicate and to share that history with them. Right. And I can't say that for Latin. I'm not a Latin speaker, but I would say that those are kind of the differences in the real life applications and anecdotes that I would encourage someone who's on the fence about learning one language over the other to just take those into consideration. Again, not being biased, not saying that one's better than the other, but saying how I've been able to apply these real world experiences to my own life.
And I think, because I did take Latin for 2 years, I'm helping the children learn, and so many of the Latin roots are in the Spanish words. And so we obviously, because we're homeschoolers, we do still study the Greek and Latin roots. Sure. And so many of them, our little cards are part of the Spanish words. And so, and the conjugations and all that, and the sentence structure is similar. So I'm just biased. I think that a living language that you can apply. My mom lives in Florida. Yeah. We went to visit her, and it would be great, like you said, if we could connect to people, connect with people, and just, never know where you are, where we can connect with people. And I think we've lost a lot of human connection. And so having that extra, totally going off a sidebar, but having that extra means of connecting with other people, I think is what kind of pushes it over the edge. So anyway, my sidebar, just parting shots, Ron, whatever I haven't asked you that you'd like us to know about Homeschool Spanish Academy. And, homeschoolers are going to be listening to this, who are, most of them are, we're single income, and our We're very picky about where we spend our money. I personally say that this is the investment and we've spent a lot of money. I mean, we've done the big software one. We won't mention names. We've done the big software one, and they've gone through quite a bit of it. Mm-hmm. And it's okay, but there's being able to have a teacher who, asks, where's La Princesa? La Princesa sitting on my lap right now. This is the cat. She knows the cat's names. Yeah. And, she knows what they're doing. They ask about, my son spent several, and I don't know if she didn't know or if she was just encouraging him to speak in Spanish, but he spent several weeks last year explaining what American baseball is.
Yeah.
His teacher.
Yeah.
And she shared pictures of your holidays and the food, and they would talk about things like that at the beginning. And that was, as a group class, there were 6 kids in there. So so found a way to connect with every kid there, and they would always just talk and chit chat. And so there's nothing, we haven't had anything, even in person here in Atlanta, we haven't had anything like this. So, I am obviously a proponent of it. And, so just parting shots, like I said, things that people who have those limited dollars need to know when they're making decisions.
Yeah, I would say, first of all, we want to encourage everybody to give us a shot. First of all, but more importantly, we want to make sure that we're a good fit for your family, right? So we offer a free class where you can actually try us out for 25 minutes. You can jump online with a teacher. After you schedule out the class, you can jump online with the teacher. We have tech support that will help you get set up to make sure that everything's working technologically. And after that, you can make a decision whether or not this is a good fit for you. In no instance do we want to, push this on anybody. We understand that there are other choices out there, but we do want to encourage you to say, hey, just give us a shot. See if we're a good fit for you and your family. We want to be the best fit. We want to offer the most value. We want to be more than a program that is just a piece of software. Although we will be incorporating more technology into our workflow, I don't think anytime soon anyway, like the teacher is ever going to go anywhere, right? Like the value of the teacher to be able to make that personal connection and to be able to say like this, like understanding. And by the way, this is probably the best part of my job, is being able to hear how it's impacting lives. And, that's why I've done this. And this is why I continue to do this. Not just me, but my entire team, is because we get to see how we're changing lives on the other end. To be able to sit at lunch and to be able to hear teachers talking about the cool things that are going on with their kids. Mm-hmm. Like that's the difference right there, because they're students. That's their students, and they have an investment in the development of your learners, your kids, your students. And so the other aspect in terms of parting shots, I will say, is that it's not just a learning experience from here's some vocab and going over this, that, or the other. This is also a cultural experience. And so to be able to understand about, and it goes both ways, to understand about American baseball, to understand about how music works, to understand about like Star Wars and some of the Jedi stuff, right?
Yes.
Like,
I'm in my son's room. It's the best acoustics in the house.
Yeah. But to be able to understand, but more importantly, even to connect on those things, because we got a lot of Star Wars fans here, believe it or not. Yeah. And then like even stuff is pronounced as tropical storms and things like that, volcano eruptions, like earthquakes. Like we'll post on our Facebook page, we'll keep our customers informed. Like we just had an earthquake, or we just had a volcano eruption. Everybody's safe. Everybody's okay. Classes will resume. And we'll just get a outpour of messages saying like, oh, tell Miss so-and-so or tell Mr. So-and-so that, or senora, that we're okay, or that we're thinking about them, like just that we're bridging the gap between cultures and people. And I think if we do our job right, we'll, in our small way, be hopefully improving the world and making the world a better place for everyone.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Ron. That is Ron Fortin with Homeschool Spanish Academy.
Thank you, Judy. It's been a pleasure.
I hope you enjoyed learning about the Homeschool Spanish Academy. As I stated, I really have enjoyed it, and I intend to continue on for the next couple of years while the children continue to explore Spanish, because I do want them to speak fluently. And this has really been the best opportunity that I have found for that to occur. One of the things that we did forget to cover, Ron and I, is that in the past, he says that students who have completed multiple years with Homeschool Spanish Academy and have formed, meaningful relationships with the teachers have been able to request recommendations for their college and for the university admissions applications. And, that's huge for a homeschooler to be able to have a teacher to provide those recommendations. It can be difficult if you're taking all of your classes in the home. So that is one of the benefits of working with the Homeschool Spanish Academy. He says that with the time invested in getting to know the students' strengths and weaknesses, as we discussed, it's always a pleasure for them to write in English a sincere letter of recommendation, which will do nothing but aid in gaining acceptance into college. So that was one of the things that Ron wanted to make sure that I let my listeners know, that that's also a possibility with your high school students. So if you have any questions about Homeschool Spanish Academy, I will have the links below. And if you have any questions specifically for me about my experience, you can contact me also at the links below. And have a great day. I'll see you next time.
Hey, one more thing before you go. As a valued member of How to Homeschool Radio, I want to help you and hear from you not only when you're listening to the show, but all day, every day. I have a new Facebook group called How to Homeschool, and it's a place where you can get together with other homeschooling families to get support, offer support, and interact real-time to homeschooling issues that are most important to you. If you want to be a part of this growing community, see the latest videos, and get live answers to your homeschooling questions, go to judysardin.com/homeschool podcast. Or you can just hop onto Facebook and search for How to Homeschool under groups. Drop me a note to let me know when you join. I can't wait to see you there.